Hey everybody, welcome. This is your Argo video. We're starting off with chapter 13 today. I'm going to be teaching you about the concepts of civil rights versus civil liberties and just some how that relates to the Constitution. This is going to be the setup for the next three chapters, which are solely about civil rights and liberties. So I need you to understand the difference before we really dive into these different concepts. So first, I'm just going to be typing along on Google Docs. You guys can write down stuff or follow along, however you want to do this. All right, so the first concept I'm going to teach you about today are civil liberties. All right, so civil liberties are the idea that are freedoms individuals have that the government cannot take away from you. So these would include some examples of this would be, oh my gosh, I am the worst. Examples, there we go, would be the First through the Ninth Amendments. So this is like the idea that you have the freedom of speech. That's in the First Amendment. The government cannot take that away from you. They can't make a law saying you can't have freedom of speech. The Second Amendment, you have the right to own a weapon, own a gun. You have the right to bear arms. That is an individual right that you have already. The government cannot take away from you. Civil rights are a little bit different from that. Oop, there we go. They are rights groups get from the government that are meant to correct past discriminations. So some examples of that in the Constitution would be like the 13th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment. Those are all like voting rights. So for instance, the 15th Amendment said, or the 13th Amendment ended slavery. So it was a right given by the government to a group. What group? African Americans. And it was meant to correct the past discrimination of slavery. 15th and 19th Amendment, voting right amendments. So what group with the 19th Amendment was being discriminated against? Women. So it's about a group getting a right from the government. Also with both of these, you're going to see you're also going to see this with the 14th Amendment. Both civil rights and liberties are seen in the 14th Amendment, which actually makes the 14th Amendment the most important amendment in the Constitution. A lot of people just assume it's the First Amendment because it's the one they've heard of the most, freedom of speech, religion. But actually, the 14th Amendment is hands down the most important amendment in the Constitution. So what does the 14th Amendment say? Well, the 14th Amendment says that if you are a citizen, naturally born or naturalized of the United States, maybe I should spell that right, you have the right to due process of law and equal protection under the law in all states. So if you look at this, I'm going to highlight a couple of things. Let's get the highlighter out. Let's use green. Okay. So due process of law right here. Okay. That's the idea that if you ever get arrested or in trouble for anything, that you get the proper trial, you get to defend yourself, you get to know the charges brought against you, you get to do it in front of your peers with a jury. That's the idea of civil liberties. So due process of law is what we get with civil liberties. Those are the freedoms the government can't take away from us. They can't just throw us in jail and then for no reason. And for no way to defend ourselves. They can't take that freedom away from us individually. They can't take that away from us. So that's due process of law. Equal protection. Let's get this. Woo, here we go. I hate using a laptop mouse. Equal protection under the law is no matter who you are, you are equally protected under the law, all groups, no matter what. That is civil rights. So these two clauses, the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment, cover both civil rights and civil liberties. So equal protection, no matter what group you're in, you are equally protected under the law in all states. So because of this situation, we have something known as selective, let me underline that so you know the words you need to know. Selective incorporation. Selective incorporation is when the Supreme Court chooses specific rights and liberties in the U.S. Constitution sorry about that, to incorporate at the state level. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples of this. Whoops, sorry about that. I don't have like a caps lock button, so I have to do that. So some examples of this I'm going to do with court cases. I'm going to say Gideon versus Wainwright. That's a good one. So this guy, Gideon, was in a bar fight and in Florida. And remember, we have state courts and national courts because of federalism. So he got in trouble in Florida. He got arrested for the bar fight, went to court, a state court in Florida. He was broke, so he couldn't afford a lawyer, and he went to jail. Well, while he was in jail, he was looking up some laws, and he looked at the Constitution, and in the Constitution, it says you have the right to legal counsel. And he's like, no, wait a second. I should have been able to have a lawyer. I was denied this. I was denied that civil liberty, and I shouldn't have gotten in trouble for this. So he took it to the courts, and he took it all the way to the Supreme Court because the state of Florida was like, no, that's only for federal laws. The U.S. Constitution protects you in federal courts and in federal lawmaking. And in the state of Florida, we don't have to provide that in our state courts. But he took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you know what? We choose the specific liberty, the Sixth Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, to be incorporated at the state level. They chose to say that Sixth Amendment will be applied to all the states. So because of that, every state from now on has to provide a public defender if they cannot afford a lawyer. So that's an example of selective incorporation, and they use the 14th Amendment to provide that. Another case like that, let me think of another good one. I'm going to use actually the first one that they ever used this with. It's called Gitlow versus New York. So this guy in New York was handing out like anti-government pamphlets, and he got arrested for it. And he went to court in the state of New York, a state court, and he got in trouble for doing that because there was a law in New York that says you can't speak ill of the national government. You'll get in trouble for it. Or not national government, the state governments. So he's like, well, I have the freedom of speech. That should be protected. And the state of New York is like, yeah, if this was a federal court case, but you are in a New York court, so you aren't protected. So he took it all the way to the national government and said, doesn't the freedom of speech apply at the state levels too, not just in a federal court? And the Supreme Court chose the specific liberty of freedom of speech to be incorporated at the state level. So those were both liberties. I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to give you a rights case. So in the court case of Obergefell versus Hodges, a same-sex couple in Ohio went to Maryland to get married, and where it was legal at the time. So they got married there. They brought the certificate back to Ohio, and Ohio would not recognize that same-sex marriage certificate because Ohio chose at the time, like I told you guys before, that states could decide marriage rules. So they took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they're like, doesn't the equal protection clause in the 14th Amendment, I know that's a national thing, but can't that apply to the states in this situation too? And the court said, yes, we select the equal protection law in the 14th Amendment to apply to all state levels when it comes to same-sex marriage. And they use this right here, if you see right here, in all states. So that's how they are able to justify that at the national level, that it needs to be incorporated at the state level. So now that you guys have a better understanding of civil liberties and civil rights, over the next few chapters, this is what we're covering. So in chapters, we're covering 13, 14, and 15. 13 and 15 are civil liberties, and I'm going to talk about those first. And then civil rights is chapter 14. I'm going to talk about that one last. So what you need to do now is work on the worksheet. You're going to be highlighting, pick a color for civil liberties, pick a color for civil rights, and pick which one is which when you're going through that worksheet. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one.